Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond the Booth. Howie Cheney along with Phil Harris, and of course it is the Northeast uh, College Softball Show with Coach Joe Guthrie. And Coach, a big weekend this past weekend for your squad, and you're off to a flying start so far.
Yeah, we had a nice week. I'm glad things worked out the way they did. It just keeps getting harder from here. We'll play a really good Central Alabama team tomorrow down at their place, and then we've got a really big challenge right after that with McLennan. We're going to play them three times, twice on Thursday, once on Friday, out of Texas, who's ranked fourth in the country. And then we'll also play a Georgia Highlands team on Friday that had won 30-plus games last year. They've got some really good players. They've got some Division I bounce backs on that team. So, and I think Central Alabama won, they won the Division II portion of our conference and went to the World Series, Division II World Series. And I believe they won 34 straight games at one point last year. So all of these teams are going to be very challenging. It's a nice start. Marion's got a good team. I expect them to win 35 or 40 games. They certainly swing the bat well in the middle of the order. But we did not, we said at the beginning of the year, there really isn't a bad team on our schedule. And that's before we get into conference. Northwest Shoals had a huge win for our league. This past weekend beating Florida Southwestern, who I think was ranked second, if I'm not mistaken, on the road. So, we want to, we're trying to beat everybody we play, but we're certainly not going to, frown upon, teams in our league getting big wins like that, because it ups the ante for our league nationally. So that was good to see that. And hopefully that'll keep coming, for the league for sure.
Absolutely. The credibility of your league will, with those wins like that, help the whole league, not just the teams, but the whole league that you're in.
I think your mic may be out. Hey, can you guys hear me? Because I'm not hearing you guys. I hear you, Phil.
You hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
All right, go ahead, Phil.
Okay. Well, Coach, I just saw this. I guess you know about it, but I just happened to just catch on my phone that Addie Edwards has been selected as ACCC Player of the Week. That's a huge honor.
Yeah, it's our first. She's the pitcher of the week. It's the first one we've had. We had a Player of the Week last year with Kimber Craig, who's now at Texas El Paso. But yeah, first pitcher of the week to my knowledge, and she certainly deserved it. There were some other kids that had some really good outings, throughout the conference. But Addie was, she was what kind of we expect out of her. And we had another kid, Aaron Harrelson, who threw really well. I think she had 5 scoreless innings of relief. So on the front and the back end of that was good to see from our pitching staff.
Yes, I think Saturday, Aaron was very instrumental in that win. I guess if you were actually say a player of the game, she may have been it, because got out to a 10-2 lead, and the bats got hot for Marion, and it seemed like they hit everything. Seemed like everything was flying around, and were having trouble getting people out. But when Aaron came in, she settled everything down and kept it at that 13 mark, and y'all got behind 13-10, and then you was able to come from behind 17-13. But what I saw, it was great of her to close the door, is this team didn't get rattled. They came back in, went back to work, got the bats going again. And so it probably was good to have a little adversity in that Saturday.
Yeah, and I wanted to create some of that. We put some kids in some tough spots. Some of them are young. I told Jimmy before the game started, I don't want this to go 5 innings. We can certainly do that. I can make that happen if we need to with the talent we have. But there's also some development that needs to happen in some tough moments for some younger kids. And I think Chloe Helton and Hallie Haynes and some of the freshmen that got time, they're certainly they'll have better outings than they had the other day. But it's good to face a team like that can hit. And and our team, that was the biggest thing of you can get a false sense of security when you have 3 games that you pretty much wipe up with, and it kind of looked like that early on, that may be the case. But, we've got to throw some of these other kids in some moments, because it's going to come, not everything's going to be 8-0 and, work out just beautifully all the time. And it was good to create some adversity there for some younger kids. And I've just never been one that, is like, we're just going to play our 9 and that's it. I've never wanted to do that. And we got a lot of people in. I was glad to see them respond. We had a lot of people come off the bench that did a really good job in some moments. We're going to continue to do that, particularly in these next 2 games. Obviously, the goal is to win, but, we've also, we've got to get, as many looks as we can, because, we've got a decent amount of non-conference games, but here in about 3 weeks, they're over. And you'll be going into conference. And I'm not saying we just play at 9 in conference, but the margins get a little tighter. And so you may not have those opportunities like we had the other day. And, that didn't go great for some of those kids, in that particular outing. But, it will, that doesn't mean it's the last time we're going to use them for sure. And hopefully they'll grow from that and go from there. So pleasing to see.
This is not an excuse, but, oftentimes when you get the weather like we had Saturday, the velocity of balls is not there. The air density, you don't get a lot of movement with your pitches. So if you leave anything out over the plate, you're hittable.
Yeah, I just think we didn't do a very good job of coming in with a competitive mindset in the middle of the, I thought Skylar started out okay. Then we kind of got into trouble, started plating some pitches. The ball up didn't spin very well. The changeup wasn't what it usually is for her. And that's what happens against a good hitting team who has seen her, they saw her Thursday. She had a little bit better outing there. And then, they saw her in the fall. So, both of those teams, us and Marion, I think that was game 8 if you combine the fall and the spring. So not surprising statistically that you would see, some high numbers like you saw. We just got to do a better job of, kind of stopping the bleeding a little sooner in the middle part there. But again, it's nice to have – we had 2 kids still ready to go in the bullpen as well that I didn't get a chance to use. We're really excited to see what, Briley Weber is going to give us. She's a hard thrower, big, strong kid from Texas, and she hasn't been out yet this spring, but that's coming very soon. So I'm excited about that. And, it's good to see Erin in a moment with a little adversity slam a door. And I think she did a really good job. And, everybody did a really good job in the game. Morgan Perkins came in and made good defensive plays. We had, pinch runners like Flores and Bellamy that came in and did their jobs. We had people come in, defensively to do some things that we needed to do to sustain momentum and win the game. And those things are, going to continue to come up. And we spent a lot of time today, before we started practice, kind of going over what we call the blueprint, our game within the game, seeing, here's the process of why we ended up where we did. It's not just supernatural. And when things are adverse, one of the things that we did a really good job of as a team is every single time somebody scored during the course of this week in a frame of an inning, we responded and scored immediately. And, that won't always happen. Our standard is if we can win half of those, we're probably going to win. But in this case, we did it 100% of the time. And, there are going to be some games, especially on the end of a weekend, where you're going to need that. We needed every bit of offense we could get out of there. So good to see that we can do that, because that game will come up again. It was a game that was kind of what I would call a big ball game. In the first part of it, where you're thinking about extra base hit and collecting base runners and not doing a whole lot of short game and that kind of thing. And then when it got close, we had to go to that, and we executed that pretty well. We had some good bullpen outings, good defensive, stops there. So, all that has been, pretty good, both, going forward. But again, that was last week, and we've got to move on now to Central Alabama for sure.
Yeah, naturally. And one thing I saw, Coach, you didn't have any physical errors. I don't even remember one, but not many mental errors. And it's tough to beat a team when they don't beat themselves.
Well, my standard for this team is this should be the best defensive team in the country. I truly believe we can do that. We may challenge that, on the pitching circle and hitting, but defense is it's the constant that we've got to do all the time, that and run the bases. And that's a challenge for our team, because when you get in games like that, they had a couple of flubs, and that, against our lineup, that's not going to bode well. And then, on our end, we didn't, and that, helps, stop the bleeding pretty fast. We've got to continue to be aware of some plays that are secondary outs that can kill an inning for the other team if we will see them quicker. I didn't think we responded great to that. We had a couple of backside outs on a double that we didn't see. We worked on that a little bit today, because, that will just take when they had all the wind in their sails there, with a home run and then a double and another double, and, you're making pitching changes. If we're able to snipe a base runner on the backside, it just deflates an offense and switches momentum. So we got to see that a little faster. I was also real pleased on the back end of the game. All games we had a lead at the end of the game. A standard for us is we call a countdown inning. We have a lead going into the last frame. Our standard is 1, 2, 3 outs and we're done. We were able to do that. So, which was something we weren't great at in the fall. So those are signs that are better, but we've got to continue to do those things if we're going to continue to win games and then ultimately championships.
Yeah, naturally, improvement's the key. Well, Coach, Addie Edwards, can't say enough about her, and we talked about her being pitcher of the week. 2 complete game shutouts. I think she gave up 5 hits and had 17 strikeouts in 10 innings of work and got 2 wins. It's nice to have a solid number 1.
Yeah, she's she's one of those. She's a special player. I mean, we knew that coming in. She obviously has good stuff. She locates well. She's improved her changeup quite a lot since she's been here. But the one thing she has that you can't teach is the bigger the moment and the more the stakes, the higher the stakes go, you'll see a better, you see another gear out of her. She doesn't particularly like practice as much as I would like her to. We're still learning how to do that. But there's that competitive gear that you just, the great ones that I've been around have that. I don't even know if she could explain why she has it, but she has it. And so, special kid, she's got to continue to compete against the game and compete against standards to be, because my big thing with Addie is I don't want her to be satisfied with just being good. She's got a chance to be a great pitcher at any level, to me. So, we'll continue to push that with her, but I'm pleased with where she's at. I think she is too. And she's going to continue to, try to strive for better, for sure.
Well, on the offensive side, Chloe Hatch was huge in game 1 and game 2. Anytime you can lead off with a home run in a softball game, that is huge. It kind of sets the tone for the day.
She's just, she's a hard working kid, great family. If you have a daughter like Chloe, you could do a lot worse. Just a kid, really good, high character values, not a lot of vices, just shows up and works really hard every day. Real credit to the community. I mean, she's a Plainview High kid. I'm sure they're really proud of her. But she's in the one hole for us. It's a major weapon because, Chloe can bunt, she can run, and she can hit for power. And, she's really fast. And that power speed combination is hard to find. But it's a weapon for us, in the one hole, because there's not a lot of players in the country like her at our level. So, just a real, I haven't had one that often, that I can think of that's been that dynamic, that can do both. And she's done a really good job, and it helps having some people around her, in the lineup that make it a little bit easier too. And she certainly does that for them as well.
Well,
Phil,
Coach,
before you move on, I finally found Addison Edwards' stats for the 2 games. She has 2-0, 10 innings pitched, 17 Ks, and a whip of .50. Pretty dang impressive right there.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, that was something we knew, coming in. I mean, she won 2 state championships in Georgia. She was the Georgia Gatorade Player of the Year. So she, Addie's, it's a high ceiling for her. And, we're just going to continue to improve on those items and go from there. But she's pretty competitive. I mean, after the first game against Marion, she was not happy that she was one hit, I think, away from a perfect game. And that's what, the great ones will, she was pissed, that it wasn't a perfect game. So I love that. I mean, the team feeds off that. So you want somebody that's a high achiever. And I think, she's certainly, moving down that road right now.
And the main stat I forgot about was an ERA of 0.00.
Mm-hmm. And we were fortunate, like I said, Addie did it over, I think you said 10 innings, and Aaron was at about 5. So, we played, some 20 something. So, the fact that we weren't giving up any, with those guys was pretty solid. And, we only flubbed 2 balls defensively. I don't think we're playing nearly close to our best defense yet with this group, but but it's a good start. So,
Uh-oh.
Coach got a phone call or a text.
Somebody must have got a phone call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Saturday, it was an impressive performance by Edwards, but Erin did. She came in. They had gotten behind, and it just seems like Marion was hitting everything, and Northeast got behind 13-10, and she just slammed the door and
you guys
took command of the game. And boy, what a great job she did.
Yeah, we got you, Coach.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a little miscue here on my end, but anyway, I'm back. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Well, Coach, I want to talk a little bit more about offense, but of course, naturally, Morgan Perkins, Marty McCluskey, two very good and powerful hitters. But a couple of them that really stood out to me was Emery Burke and also Francisca Lump. She has got a lot of pop in her bat. I told Joe, I said, even when she fouls balls off, she hits balls solid.
Yeah, we were real fortunate. I mean, Emery is a kid that I recruited and signed at UAB. She's she's right down the road in Crossville, and then she played for me in the summer in the Scenic City Collegiate League.
Oh, lost him again. You can tell we're in the middle of softball season. He's probably getting a lot of phone calls, not necessarily from players, but from other coaches as well.
Well, I mean, and that's like, I guarantee you're probably getting it from, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. Who you got? Because they're going to get that all the time. I imagine they get a lot of phone calls like that when they're not playing. But, it's a busy time of year.
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats here, and the batting average is 667 to 429 on those players that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think their team batting average is like 506, I think.
Yeah, you guys, sorry about that, guys. I think I got it fixed on my end. But we had 508 for the weekend. But just talking about Emery, you mentioned Emery and Lump. Emery's a kid that really just kind of didn't get a lot of opportunities at UAB. She really had a great summer. She's just a great, work ethic kid, great family. And so, it's personally satisfying to me to see her development kind of come full circle, this year and last summer, because she's been through a lot. Lump is a similar kid, is a recommend. She was at Memphis, bounced back to us. Really good player. She's got all the tools, and there were some friends of mine that had worked with her, coached with her, or coached her over at Memphis, and she was kind of again with all the DSA stuff and everything that came about last summer, kind of got lost in the shuffle, and she's committed to becoming a better player, and it certainly shows out there. So those two guys did a really good job. I mean, there were a lot of them. I don't think that Acuff and Sullivan, it seemed like every time that they were up, they were on. Bree Wilson did some really good things for a freshman. I mean, we just had a really, really, really good offensive weekend. It won't always be that way. Obviously, if you watch Marty McCluskey more than 5 minutes, it's just an extraordinary amount of power. She's a very gifted athlete. She can pretty much play anywhere on the field, has a lot of tools, and these kids are very humble. I think, Austin McNeese, I think at one point was like 8 for her last 12. She did a really, really good job, with 2 outs. And that's something she's committed to, is being a little more humble with what the game tells you to do. So very pleased with where those guys are for sure.
Yeah.
Coach, I'm looking at Marty's stat line here, and she's got every column filled up. She's, of course, she's a utility player for you, so it's 4 games. She's 12 at bats, 6 of 12, 6 RBIs, four base on balls, a double, a triple, 2 home runs, 4 extra base hits, and she's only struck out 1 time with a batting average of 500.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, she's got a chance to be really good. She struggled some in the fall. It's a big jump going from high school to playing the schedule we played in the fall. And, it shows kind of the character of the kid. She kept working, didn't allow doubt to linger for very long. And, the tools are there, with her. If she just, keeps working and keeps pulling the trigger at the plate, the sky's the limit with her. And, she's just like Acuff, just like McNeese. I mean, those guys, like when we're running situation work like we were today, they want to know why we're doing what we're doing, if they're doing it right, ways that we can get better. And those are the kind of kids that are going to, do some good things for you.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, Coach, of course, doing the PA, I kind of got caught up in the trying to get everything situated in that, but the game finally slowed down for me a little bit, and I got to watch a lot of the game, and I like the swagger of this team. It seemed like they were very loose in warm-ups, having a good time. But when the game started, they got down to business. And, of course, when they got behind, they stayed in that business mode. I like the swagger of this team. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, we try to let them, be themselves until it's time to, there's a time to be loose and silly, and then there's a time to do what they need to do. And they do a pretty good job. We're still learning, times that, today I felt like we came in a little complacent in practice, which is understandable. We're going to have to learn we will either learn this one of 2 ways. Either we will learn quick enough to be mature enough to handle success, or we're going to learn it the hard way and somebody's going to beat us. And I'd rather learn it now rather than have to take a loss that way. So, because we certainly don't have anything to be complacent about at this point. But they, up to this point, they've done a good job. I'm going to challenge them tomorrow. I challenge them at the end of practice that we've got to come out better than we did today. And we have a high standard, and, I'm all about having fun, but the fun's in the winning. It's not, I've never met anybody that had fun losing. So, this is a really challenging year. I don't think there's a clear-cut number one. We're playing some really good teams. So, there are a lot of things that are out there for us to take if we decide to, consistently do the things that helped us have success this week.
Yeah, and I guess kind of what you're talking about, Coach, is, be careful. You got to be careful not to drink the Kool-Aid. It's a long season and it's a grind. So, one weekend was great, but naturally it's going to get tougher because this week, very good competition.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I felt like, it's that opening day, I listened to a really good talk, Darren Fenster, who was a longtime, base running outfielding coordinator for the Boston Red Sox. He gave a talk several years ago, and he's showing his outfield and his infield prep on the opening day. And they're all in sync. It looks great. It's exactly what, people that know what they're doing would teach. And then he showed it after about 2 months, and they're in 60 games at this point, and it's not very good, and the point of it is anybody, that opening day feeling is easy, but, to your point about the grind, that is, baseball and softball have that word, kind of attached to their DNA. It is a grind from a mental and physical standpoint that is a lot more unique than a lot of other sports. Football and basketball, for example, are so physically demanding. You can't play as many games on top of one another. But, in baseball and softball, you can, it's kind of pick up and go every day. And there's a physical part to that, and there's a mental part to that. And, you've got to be grounded in what you're doing and continue to do the things physically and mentally to prepare to have success. And that's hard. And a lot of people won't do it. Most people won't do it. And the ones that at the end of the year, only one team really has a great year. And that's the ones that, win a championship. So that's a tough task. We certainly welcome that and know it's in front of us. But yeah, it's a nice start to get that rolling for sure.
Yeah, and I think maybe what you're saying is kind of like in baseball and softball, routine gets demanding, and it's tough to stay in it mentally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very much that type of, and that's why we spend a lot of time making sure they understand, it's a connect the dots kind of mentality in the teach. We don't get, a run in this scenario if so-and-so doesn't have the patience to walk to lead off the inning, and then we get a bunt down correctly, and now they're at second base, and then there's a humble 2-strike approach that leads to a, CNI single through the 3-4 hole, and that ends up that we score a run. All those little things add up. Everybody in the crowd sees the run, but there's about 4 or 5 things that have to happen to work to get that run. And it is work. We played really well, and it looks easy, the last 4 games, but it's not. I mean, anything in this game, we could roll out tomorrow and be in a 1-0 game real easy. That's kind of how the game is, especially after scoring 47 runs in 4 games. The law averages will come back to get you, and so you've got to find ways to win for sure.
Well, what was your assessment of the crowd, Coach? It was a cold day, and kind of sort of hard for everybody to get into it. But what was your assessment of your opening day atmosphere?
I thought it was really good. I was concerned that it wouldn't be. We had recruits in for the weekend that were from far away as Chicago. So it was cool to have those guys down.
They probably felt like they're at home being from Chicago.
They did, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, I mean, we've kind of found a little niche with some of those guys coming down. And it's certainly, we may be cold compared to, say, the coast of Alabama, but yeah, it's nothing compared to Chicago. I can tell you from experience in the Big Ten. But yeah, I thought the crowd was good. I mean, it's a unique, atmosphere, and I think it will grow, as the weather gets better. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be there. Like when I told you guys off the air, I went up and saw some games in Chattanooga Sunday, and the weather was a lot more pleasant just on Sunday than it was on Saturday. So, I can be a fan sometimes too. So I certainly understand that. But I thought, considering all that, it was still pretty good.
Yeah, definitely was. I don't know if you know this, Coach, but the third baseman for Marion, Abby Phillips, she is from Mentone and played at Fort Payne. So she had a nice little cheering section there. So that was good. That was kind of a homecoming for her because she's 3 hours away. I got to talk with her just a little bit, and she was all excited. She goes, "Yeah, my family don't get to come see me down at Marion, but since we play up here," she goes, they got to come see me. So that was exciting for her too.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they got to do that.
Yeah, that was nice. Well, Coach, going forward, you make the trip down to Alexander City tomorrow. I guess y'all leave early in the morning. I guess, in a sense, you're Series 1 to Series 2. I guess the big thing you want to see is continued improvement.
Yeah, we're going to, I'd like to see us hold the second game down a little bit better in the circle. We've got to continue. We're going to see some more adversity. They're going to be able to run some short game things at us we haven't seen a lot of yet. We've got to continue to do that right. Our defense, I feel like, will be challenged a little more in a different way. Not that Marion didn't challenge us, but they're more of kind of a big ball team. They're not super fast, and this team's got a little speed. And I don't think they're going to beat themselves. They pitched and defended really well. Up until this point. So we're going to, we'll have our hands full. And like I said, after that, it's only going to get, it's only going to get stronger. So, but we've got to be 100% focused on, the task at hand at Central Alabama, because they've been a really good team for a long time. Like I said, in the Division II World Series a year ago, when they were Division I, they were going to that as well. Just a lot of success. I have a lot of respect for Greg Shivers, who's their coach, who's been there for a long, long time, and probably a Hall of Fame type guy, in my opinion. Done a really good job. So, we'll have our work cut out for us. and then obviously when McLennan and Georgia Highlands come in, have a lot of respect for those guys too. Chris Berry and Jimmy and I go way back. And it's really cool that he decided to bring that group all the way from Waco, Texas to come play us as a second-year program. And, I think he told me over the phone they have 15 opening day starters on Division I rosters this year, and I think he's got 8 signees right now on his team. So this is a really good team. And, again, we'll get to them come Thursday, but right now the business at hand is definitely Central Alabama.
Well, Coach, I kind of want to speak on this. As this team becomes relevant, gets very good, the competition rising. I was talking to Chad Gorham before the game Saturday, and he was talking about, they don't really have any kind of security problems, no fans, they had no issues last year. I said, Chad, the thing is, as this team gets better, you're going to have more rivalries. I said, like when you play a Gadsden City and you're playing for first place, things are going to get a little chippy at times, but that's good. That's the kind of thing you want to see. You want fans to get into it because the players feed off that kind of energy.
Yeah, I think, it's just part of the byproduct of, we think we're going to have some success this year. And I don't really focus around any of that as much as we just are about, getting better on the field. But certainly we welcome, the growth and expansion of the fan base. And that's part of why we're doing what we're doing here and some of the other places to grow that. We will have, we've got a national media outlet coming down, Fast Pitch Wire is coming down to see us, I think they just did Florida State, and we're next for the McLennan game, which is a really big honor that's coming down. So that'll be, all that's part of a growth of success. And, we're excited about that. And, I think that'll be good for our program and our school for sure.
Well, Coach, going from fall of last year into the spring of this year, I see a big difference. Do you see a big difference in this softball team as far as maturity goes in their work ethic and even in their work ethic when coaches aren't actually watching?
Yeah, I mean, we had a ton of kids in, voluntarily before we played on Saturday, which is a good sign. They were using the facility, swinging the bat, getting ready. That's a big, that when you don't have to force feed a team to do that, that's usually a sign of a team that's going to do well. There were several of them asking us going out the door. Tomorrow we leave at 8:45. Jimmy Kalidas, who deserves, a ton of credit for everything he's done for the athletic program and our program. He's willing to go up there at any time, to get things done on that end. But, the desire to get better is something that you can infuse to an extent as a coach, but it's really kind of something that's organic within a player, in my experience, when they really want to go to that highest level. So we're excited about that. Those are all good signs, and we just got to continue on that path.
Yeah, and that's a great thing, and and being in year 2, it's probably a whole lot easier for you folks as a staff, you, Courtney, and Jimmy, in that the kids kind of understand where you're coming from. They're learning. You probably don't, a lot less terminology, more working on detail.
Yeah, I think all those pieces are there. We just need to continue to be challenged and go through adverse moments to get better. I think, and obviously that's coming. I mean, we're gonna have a lot. This is going to be a big February, and we want to win every game. My biggest thing is, can we be the best version of ourselves prior to March when we start conference? And hopefully we go through that. We earn a postseason berth, maybe even a championship. And then we get into the playoffs times, which is you want to be the best version of yourself then. And those will all require some humility and some adversity and the ability to, and some toughness and some courage, for us to get where we need to go. So all that we're going to welcome and, and also enjoy the ride a little bit.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I want to ask you so far this season, is there anything that kind of alarms you with this team that you need a lot of improvement in?
I wouldn't say right now really anything. We just need, we need to, it's the little things. There's nothing glaring. We need to stay on top of the little items, to make sure we have a good understanding of how to adjust and when to adjust. I think all the pieces are there, but it's going to be little items. We had a chance to run Rural Marion in the first game, or in the second game down there. We had a little base running communication gap at third base. Those are things we've got to clean up. It wasn't a big deal in that game. I was actually kind of secretly glad that we got to play 2 more innings to give me some time to get some other players in. But, as we're learning to, kind of put our foot on the gas and end the game, those are things that need to be cleaned up. And we went through, like I said, we had about a half-hour meeting this morning. This afternoon before practice. Every Monday, we always hit on the items that we've done well, what we haven't done well. We kind of turn it into, kind of a little math game. It could be, how fast, how many times we're getting off the field with 2 outs without a blemish. What's our scoring percentage, the runner at 2, the runner at 3. All those are the little things that add up to wins, and kind of showing our team, if we do these items, we'll have success, and it's a proven method. If we don't, we won't. So that's kind of a measuring stick for getting buy-in into the process that leads to winning. So, that's really the biggest thing we've got to be focused on from here on out.
Well, Coach, I know sometimes coaches are psychological geniuses. Is that some of the things you use to keep them kind of sort of into it mentally, to give them something to challenge them that's not on the softball field?
Yeah, I think all the pieces matter. And I think that you kind of have to know what the game is demanding and when it's demanding it. And you have to be pretty precise in when you're doing that and how you're teaching it. And so your kids have a lot of weapons to be able to have success no matter what the game throws at them. And there's a lot of things that the game throws at you. The more that we do that, the better we're going to be. The generation of coaches that I grew up under, that was like the Bible when that thought process, and relative to softball, you had to, have really, really acute situational awareness. In this generation, that has changed because there's been such an emphasis on playing, showcasing, getting recruited, and we've missed pretty gravely on, their ability to learn just the fundamentals, the situational fundamentals of the game. And so we spend a lot of time on that. This group really embraces that. There's a lot of former players in the parents of this group, which I think helps, because that's obviously something that they valued prior to coming to us. That was something that we kind of, as much as we could, if we could get a kid like that, that's kind of permeated in our roster. So I think, all of those things add up to, a good marriage between what we're trying to do and what the players, are desiring as well. So, all that's been good so far.
Well, Coach, I'm going to turn you over and let Howie ask you a couple of questions. But being there Saturday, I'm hooked. I enjoy. I like the softball team. I think the sky's the limit. And but it was a real pleasure to watch them play Saturday and do as well as they did. And hopefully a lot of wins are going to come.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys being there and everything you do, and we'll keep the ball rolling for sure.
Coach, I got to give you a hard time about Saturday on that first game, only scoring 8 runs compared to all the other games. What's going on?
Well, we actually it's fun. We have a kind of one lineup is a little more offensive heavy, and the other one is a little more defensive heavy. We haven't really cut it in half. We have one that's kind of a power lineup, and the other one's a speed lineup. We haven't really used that one yet, which I'm kind of wanting to see this week how that goes. The group that's been in game one's a little bit more defensive oriented, but they're still scoring runs. We may flip that, going into tomorrow, but yeah, it's not a huge difference, obviously, because we've scored runs in every game, but it allows us to kind of, specialize the roles a little more when we're doing it, and also just we have some kids that can do a lot of things, so that kind of makes it a good problem to have for sure.
Absolutely, coach. It's 4 games. You've scored 47 runs. Your batting average is 508. On base percentage is 545. Your slugging percentage is 790 with 7 home runs. You couldn't. I mean, you might could ask for a better start than that, but it'd be hard pressed to get much of a better start than that.
Yeah, it'll just be, we know we can. That should tell us we have confidence that we're a really good hitting team. That now the test in front of us will be when we see that pitching that will stop that, because good pitching beats good hitting. How do we adjust to that and respond to that? And that's coming. It may come every game this week. It's certainly going to come at some point this week. So, how fast we can adjust and respond and evaluate that response as coaches and help, utilize, put in some of the tools that, we've been working on throughout the winter to adjust, I think will help us for sure.
You spoke on something a little bit earlier that I used to watch the Braves play all the time, and one of the commentators on there was the late great Don Sutton,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd always talk about the ABCs of baseball: get them on, get them on, get them over, get them in. And you kind of mentioned a little bit about that a little bit earlier, and but you phrased it a little bit different. But how much do you actually work with your team to be able to just do that short term stuff?
So we kind of break it into basically 2 games. Our A game, for lack of a better term, that's what we call it, is, when we're coming out there and that's what we're always.
Uh-oh.
Lost him again. He'll be back in a second.
Yeah, we'll give him just
Yeah,
a second.
I kind of had to give him a hard time about only scoring those 8 runs in that one game compared to all the others. For some of the ones that don't realize it, let me pull it back up real quick. The first game of the year there was 10-0, and
You guys hear me?
Well, they
yeah, we
run
got you
road.
back.
They run road them, because in it's run row in 5. So if you're up by 8 in 5 innings, that's run row. So they run road them in game 1.
Yeah.
But no, to answer your question, sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties today, but the A game is basically us going out and, trying to, each player staying within their plan, trying to drive the ball for extra bases. And there's not a lot of bunting, not a lot of running, involved when we're doing that. Now, if that gets taken away from us, then we will go into, we may go into 2 strike plans from, right off from an 0-0 count. That'll mix with some bunts, some runs, where the game becomes, more of a 60-foot game. Like I had mentioned earlier, we had a little bit of that in that last game Saturday. So we're going to have to be able to play both games if we're going to win. We've got to be able to defend both games if we're going to win, and we've got to be able to pitch out of both of those. So that's something, that's the way we sort of phrase it and teach it and make it implemental in our with our kids. So so far I know we've got a good A game. We'll see how good we are with the B game, because that's going to come this week a little bit, and we'll see what happens.
Have you ever just saw a player up there at the bat and everything? You just tell them to swing away, swing as hard as you can.
No, we're we Jimmy and I are pretty precise in what we're at, but we do use some some terminology that kind of falls in that. It just kind of depends on the hitter. There are some that are real finicky, and there are others that are probably over aggressive. So I still believe that especially when it comes to hitting and coaching overall, really, I mean, you've got to be able to know the player that you're coaching, because what works for, even if you've got a lot of knowledge, what works for one hitter or one player in any kind of adjustment isn't necessarily going to work for another if you don't understand what that individual's about. So I remember we were facing a Michigan pitcher when I was at Penn State that was kind of effectively wild, and we had a 9-hole hitter that basically the rest of our team was going into more of a kind of a passive attack plan, because we had to really kind of make her work and wait on our pitch. And, you know, the 9-hole hitter, if you told her to do that, she does that anyway. So when we were having our hitting meetings, you know, I wanted her excluded from any of those conversations. I didn't want that, you know, remotely going in her ear, because that's how she's naturally wired. So if you tell her that, she might not swing the bat the entire day, you know, which you don't want. So you've got to know, that's an example of kind of knowing how the clock ticks with every player, and not just the situation of what it's, you know, what the game's, you know, requiring. That is particularly true to me with hitting and pitching, probably more so than other skills, because they're very finite, especially hitting, because it's probably the hardest thing there is to do. So, yeah, those are just things you kind of pick up over time for sure.
I got 2 more questions, and we'll let you get going, because we know it's going to be early morning for you in the morning, taking that trip and getting those W's down there and coming back. So, one of them you mentioned a little bit earlier, a fine line between being too cocky and confident. You know, there's a fine line in between being cocky and confident. How do you control your team and make them realize, hey, you got to straddle it a little bit, but you can't go too far one way than the other?
We just have to continue to, you know, pay attention to what's important in terms of what the game's telling us to do. You know, if they score first, we've got to answer back. If we score, we have to shut them down in an inning. If we have momentum late, we've got to count down the outs and win. You know, that's really where our mind needs to be until it's over. And then, you know, be happy for yourselves, congratulate yourselves, and then work on the things that we will have to do every game to get better, and stay, you know, try to stay in a mindset that is, you know, as clean emotionally as you can be in, which is difficult because it's an emotional task we're in, and move on. You know, like I told him today, you know, if we had gone 0-4, it would be time to move on. We happen to go 4-0, it's time to move on, you know, to where we need to go. And, you know, if we can continue to move forward, regardless of what happens, with that kind of mindset, and pay attention to what the game's telling us to do and work on those things to improve, we're going to be okay. And the rest of it will go from, you know, we'll take care of itself.
And the last question from myself for the day is, I know you probably wasn't able to pay much attention to it, but how did the PA announcer do Saturday for y'all?
Yeah, I think, you know, he did fine. We had the biggest issues we had nothing to do with the announcers. We had some technical microphone issues. You know, some of those, I don't think I've ever had a first day anywhere that I've been where there haven't been those type of things happen. It's just part of, you know, an opening day deal. And, you know, one of the things that's tough for us is, you know, we're trying to run, and Phil got a front row seat to this. What we do is very comparable to a Division I setup. We don't necessarily have a Division I crew. Like, we don't have a sound production crew or, you know, a media department or any of that. So, you know, when you guys come help us, that helps us quite a lot. And that's true of a lot of teams in our league. You know, the coach may be running ops and everything down there, and it's difficult. You know, when you're not doing that, it certainly makes you appreciate those guys we had in Division I. And there's more media things to do now. You know, you're not just flipping buttons on a scoreboard and calling out the PA. I mean, that scoreboard can do more things than we probably know. So there's just a lot of things that go into game day operations, and we certainly appreciate what Phil does and what everybody does. You know, he mentioned Chad Gorham and Kip Williamson and you know, John Allen Pope do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, from, you know, game day administration to you know, testing bats, and they just do it, you know, helping our recruits when they're there. Those are things that are not unappreciated by us, and certainly a lot of hard work on a weekend that they don't, you know, they could be doing other things. So we certainly appreciate Phil and everybody that, you know, helps us out for sure.
Well, you know, it's like with Jimmy, you know, he's up there making sure everything's okay, making sure we're okay. And then in spare time, he's trying to coach softball too. So,
Yeah.
Because everybody has to be a jack of all trades, like you're talking about. It's not like it is at the Division I level where you kind of got one job. Everybody's trying to work together to make everything fit. But it'll get better. It got better as the day went on. Got a lot easier for me.
Yeah.
And of course, the biggest thing for me I've got is timing.
Yeah.
that's what I've got to get down. That's more than anything else. Everything kind of sort of started falling into place, and I was trusting what I saw around me.
Yeah.
And it got better. It got better as the day goes on.
No doubt. Well, we
It
certainly
was a lot of
appreciate
fun.
it.
Yeah,
We
it was a lot
certainly
of fun.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Well,
Well,
Coach, I
thank you,
did want to
guys.
ask you about one thing, and you had kind of mentioned on this. It's nice with this softball team, a lot of versatility, a lot of moving parts. And I noticed that when you do use those interchanging parts, you don't have much drop off.
No, that's why kids like, Acuff comes to mind. She's not going to get a kid or be a kid that, really like gets the front row eek. She is highly valuable as a ball player, and she can play short, third, second. She could catch. We don't need her to do that. Her softball IQ is as good as anybody I've ever had, even up to the pro league. She's really, really in tune that way. Special kid. McCluskey's learning that. She's got a lot of raw athletic skills that allow us to do some different things. EB in the middle, we can do some things with her. Obviously, it's not hard to see, with Morgan Perkins, what kind of athlete she is. And those are just a couple that, shoot out there. That helps us a lot to be able to work some different things. And it also works in some other people to develop. It was nice to be able to get Savannah Cantrell's a kid's got tremendous upside. She got to start some at first. We're kind of easing her into doing some of that. She's a catcher first baseman second. So, the fact that we've got some versatility to do that helps us get some at bats for her. And she's going to be a really, really good player. That versatility helps us kind of utilize players that way too.
Good deal, Coach. We appreciate your time. Busy time of the year for you, but we appreciate you coming on here every 2 weeks on Monday afternoon to talk to us about the previous weeks that's taken place, and just keep on rolling along like you are right now, Coach. Because we enjoy talking to you after all these debuts.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all having me.
Hey, we're not going to let you get out of here without giving shout outs. You know that.
Well, really want to thank, is a good opener, and we just appreciate, I think it's real special, at Northeast. Appreciate all the parents, all the supporters. Dr. David Campbell, just a tremendous, help that he's been. He's been right there texting Jimmy and me all, with everything we do. If you're around Northeast, he's on top of everything, and we just appreciate our school and our community support, and we look forward to doing that as we continue to grow some bigger events, moving forward.
Awesome. Hopefully one day you can have a big tournament like they did down in Troy this past weekend, bring in a lot of teams and make a weekend out of it.
Yeah, that's kind of the thought process behind, the McLennan deal this weekend. And that'll be kind of a, sort of an opening act, but we do want to grow that and get some more nationally recognized teams like they are, here. We might not do that every year. We certainly owe them a trip next year to Waco. They were gracious enough to come out here. So, we appreciate that. And, that's only good for softball and for our state and for the sport. So, we're excited about it.
Absolutely. And from us, of course, here at RiverCity-Media, best of luck this coming week. And for the next 2 weeks, we won't see you for about 2 weeks, but best of luck to you. And of course, you'll see Phil at the home games doing this PA announcing. And if there's anything else that we can do to help you out, don't hesitate to ask. We'll be more than happy to try to help you out any way possible.
Absolutely. We appreciate it, guys. Thank y'all very much for having me.
Oh, no problem. So for Phil Harris, I'm the Howard Shannon, and of course, Coach Joe Guthrie of the Northeast Mustangs softball team, off to a great 4-0 start, scoring a lot of runs. It seems more like football scores than it does softball scores, but as long as you're on the end with the bigger number, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
Thank y'all, and good night, everybody.